Happy Thursday, everyone. This is Laurie-Ann, and you are listening to Be in Demand. This is the podcast where I help entrepreneurs just like you leverage speaking opportunities. And this is a special speaker breakthrough session. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here. I was saying before, I've never been coached, so this is exciting.
Really? You're a coach newbie? You're as in you've never experienced the other side of coaching, but do you coach?
I do spiritual direction, which has some similarities and some differences. And I used to be a therapist. So again, some similarities, some differences.
What do you do and how do you help people? Let's start with that.
Sure. So I am primarily a hospital chaplain. And then I also work in a private practice as a spiritual director. And I journey with people who are suffering, often going through grief and loss, and help them to get in touch with their spirituality and build resilience. And I also do a lot of education to others about how to better support someone when your friend or family is going through a crisis. And a lot of why I want to get into speaking is because I'm passionate about these topics as a mission. And I love to write, and I write primarily, and I'm hoping to grow my platform. And I've learned a lot that one of the best ways to do that is to be in front of audiences.
Oh, you're talking my language, making me smile. So besides the hospital work and working obviously one-on-one, is there any other way that you work with people besides what you've already mentioned, writing, wanting to speak, and working with people one-on-one?
Those are the primary ways. I am also a professor at a seminary, so I do teach classes as well, and I teach an internship program, but those are much smaller audiences.
Yes. What do you hope to do? What is your big vision?
Yeah, so I would really like to contribute to some thought leadership around spirituality, around grief. I also do some work in self-care. And I see myself as someone who can be approachable from a religious or spiritual perspective, especially for people who do not have that in their background, or it's been really toxic. So I'm hoping to help healing processes for individuals that are looking for that.
Okay. What would you like to get out of this coaching session? How can I help you? Is there an obstacle that I can help you with, or something that's holding you back?
Yeah, so I think really trying to refine what is my mission and my message. I feel like I have a couple of different things that I speak about, occasionally when I'm asked to speak on any given moment, or different things that I've written about, and trying to, pinpoint it, even if it's, 2 to 3 different keynotes, but how do I really pin home the message? And then also one that is marketable, right? I often wonder, I'm like, I don't know, a lot of what I write about and talk about, it's kind of sad. It's kind of a bummer, especially when I'm sharing stories from my work in the hospital. I think it's profoundly meaningful, but I'm not sure that there's corporate audiences that necessarily, want to pay for someone to talk about grief or loss or spirituality. So I'm trying to figure out, where is there a market even for any of this?
Okay, you bring up a very good point, and you have to market in the sense of your buyer's language.
Okay.
The best example that I love to share with people is nobody is searching for a customer service speaker, because it's not called customer service anymore. It's called customer engagement. So we changed the wording, even though it's the same thing. You may be teaching about customer service, but let's just say your speech and your topics are getting like a facelift, and now we're going to call it speaker engagement, because that's the verbiage that your audience, that your buyers are using, and that your audience will come into the room because oh yeah, I want to learn about customer engagement tips. But customer service is oh yeah, I'll go this out. I think I'll go have coffee instead while this breakout
Right. It sounds more boring.
Yeah. But let's talk about the grief.
Mm-hmm.
I've had clients who are experts in grief, and I learned from working with them that there are 40 different types of grief. And it's wow, I had no idea. I just thought grief was grief, but apparently not. And I would imagine that grief, loss, shows up in many different ways.
Yes. So that's something I like to educate about, that there's so many different types of loss. And my mantra that I go back to is that we are all grieving something at any point in time. We just have no idea that what we're going through may be kind of an ambiguous loss. And so putting the name to something and helping people realize, oh, that's the funk I've been walking around in. I left this job and now I'm at a new job. And even though it's a promotion, it's a big deal. I'm still feeling off. Yeah, you're grieving your previous job. Even if this is, a happy change, there's still that loss there. But I thought my husband likes to laugh at me because it's like, oh, no one wants to be told that they're grieving either, that they're having all this loss. So I've been trying to figure out, well, how do I do it from more of a resilience perspective or an empathy, cultivating empathy from yourself and what others are going through.
Okay. Let's put ourselves in the position of a CEO.
Okay.
Pick any big company, okay? And they want to bring in a speaker. Are they going to bring in the grief speaker? Or are they going to bring in the resilience speaker? It's like you're sharing the exact same thing in both of those speeches.
Mm-hmm.
They're just titled differently.
Okay.
Okay. So is it easier to call the grief topic resilience? Or is there another word for it? Because I do feel like resilience is getting like a little
It's overplayed now,
overused.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so. Some of how I'm struggling to put it, and this is why I needed you. Right? I'm like, how do I make it, more engaging and more exciting? I think maybe something to do with change, like navigating change, could potentially have a little bit more traction. And I see change, and I see change all the time in terms of people's physical status and emotional changes, and a lot could kind of fit under that. And then I have wondered too about really, this is another question I have for you, because I also have spoken and written about imposter syndrome and self care, but I don't know if that's too different, of a topic. And if you recommend just trying one thing and sticking with that, or having, a couple of
Well, wait a
different.
minute. Let's investigate this
Okay.
imposter syndrome. So I come from the leadership and corporate engagement, and I used to do a lot of executive coaching.
Mhm.
And I remember asking them, because I could see it in their 360 evaluations that they were suffering, or they had this layer of imposter syndrome that was showing up in their 360s. And I got to tell you, like 9 out of 10 of the executives had no idea what imposter syndrome was.
Really? Oh,
Yes,
I thought this was old. I thought this was old news at this point.
that's what I thought. So just an interesting tidbit. I mean, maybe it's getting more, like it's getting more media attention, and I am seeing it a little bit more often, but just something to maybe do some market research with is, what are people calling this? But as a CEO,
Mhm.
like, what is the result of somebody having imposter syndrome?
Yeah, so I think the result would be not being as confident in their work as they could be. And the ways that that might show up well, I mean, in some ways, it's helpful for CEOs to have employees with imposter syndrome, as the research bears it out. So it may not be a problem that they won't solve, because it means that people work harder. That's a lot of the new research that's out there. But I think if I were to tie it into, to me, it's also a feature of wellness, because you're going to have employees that burn themselves out if they are working so hard, or if they are constantly believing that they are not good enough. Then they're not going to be able to, be their best selves at work.
And if they're not feeling like they're doing a good job at
Mhm.
this particular corporation,
They're going to leave. Yeah, so it's a
they're getting
retention
burnt out.
issue.
Right.
Mhm. Okay,
So
so that's
there
what I have to
is,
get to, like
yeah, so there's
the
this
why.
huge benefit of like really addressing the
Mhm.
imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
So a CEO, like whether or not he realizes that there's like that part of his staff is suffering from imposter syndrome, what could we call that? Like almost like, what's the result of them listening to you speak?
So I'm just thinking, I wrote an article about this, and it got a lot of traction, which is why I was like, oh, maybe there's something there. And I came up with 6 things to counteract imposter syndrome. So 6 ways, a prescription, 6 ways to treat this, syndrome. So I think what they would walk away with is, how, I mean, yeah, we want to get away from the resilience term, but how to, you know,
Change.
yeah, I guess it's all about change. That's
Yeah.
the connection.
how to navigate
Mhm.
change.
Mhm.
And as a CEO of a big corporation or even a medium-sized corporation, I mean, they're constantly navigating change. We are constantly changing
Mm.
depending on what the market is and who are these I mean, everybody's having hiring problems. That's a change.
Mm.
Also,
Mhm.
how do we address this new problem? So lots of change.
Hmm. Yeah, and that fits with a lot of what I could put on it. It could be different angles of it, but yeah, if there's, I know in my mind, if there's change, there's loss, and a lot of these principles would be applicable, to corporations.
So you're
Okay.
leading with change
Hmm.
and you're teaching them about imposter syndrome, about production, productivity, performance, resilience. You've got all this other stuff, but you're leading with change.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that I could certainly do that and do it in an authentic way, and then build from my experience. Like, so I guess that would be the point. So I think what I'm sitting with now is when I speak, I often incorporate stories from my work in the hospital, especially with being with patients who are close to death and the lessons that they've learned and really what matters in the end. And so I'm trying to figure out, is there a way to weave some of those into my talks that in a way that wouldn't be completely depressing and demoralizing?
No, it
Um,
won't be depressing because you're going to tell stories about people on their deathbed. And then what
mhm.
you do as a speaker is here's what I want you to take away from this.
Mm.
Never let the audience
Right, make
come to
that.
make the
Mhm.
conclusion. Let's
Okay.
tell them because we as a speaker are the pathfinder. We are leading them down this path and educating them and sharing our tips and knowledge and experience and thought leadership with them. So we tell them what to take away with this. What I want you to learn from this is what I hear in this story. This is how you can use this.
Mhm.
Tell them what the lesson is.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that would definitely work. I'll have to give more thought to this kind of change on a larger level. And then I'm guessing for most places, I should just check the spirituality stuff at the door in terms of not engaging with that so much. Or does
So,
that depend on the audience?
well, it's going to depend on the audience. So, a couple of things that I'm thinking of. It's almost like politics. It really can
Yeah.
divide the room very quickly, where you'll
Mhm.
have people that are going to listen and other people who are just going to like check out because they're like, oh, she's a spiritual advisor,
Right.
and like I'm not on that road. So, check. But there's also, and I don't know if you know this, but there are Christian women's speaker bureaus.
Someone just mentioned that to me the other day.
You
So,
obviously would be perfect for that.
okay. All right. I will look into those then.
Yeah, like a couple of things. You're gonna need to have your speeches.
Mhm.
You gotta be outstanding on the stage
Mhm.
and start working towards testimonials and really good video. So I would definitely check out the Christian Women's Speaker Bureaus
Mhm.
and look at some of those speakers and just see what they have
Right.
and
Okay.
how they present themselves.
Okay. And do
So
you
that
recommend? Mhm. Yeah,
sorry, go
and
ahead.
so I was gonna say related to that, like I don't have a speaker reel yet. I do have a website. It says speaking. I got to punch it up a little bit, but it's out there. But that's what I wondered about. Like, okay, how do I get more gigs when I don't, have much to show from any of like the small things that I've done?
That's okay. You can start now.
Okay.
But also look at it this way. Every meeting planner and conference organizer knows
Mhm.
that every speaker's speaker reel is their very best stuff. It's like a first date, okay? Everybody brings their best self to the date, and then the truth comes out, okay, later
Mhm.
on. So there are ways around this that I teach my clients. And one of them is if are you on any social media doing any sort of live streams?
I just started reels on Instagram. I'm like so slow to all of it. So someone told me TikTok. I was like, I can't do that. I'm too old for that. But I've been trying for some of the other ones.
Okay, so let's just take Instagram. Do reels, do stories, do lives. So these are you actually speaking like right on the moment. As a meeting planner, yeah, they can go watch this fancy speaker reel, but they're
Mhm.
also going to go to your website, your Instagram if you lead them there, and they're going to watch you speak. They're going to
Mm.
watch your reels. They're going to see your material. If you've been on podcasts, like, well, you've been on
Mhm.
this one, you know,
I have done a lot of podcasts. I will say that.
on your
Mhm.
on your website, I would be
Mhm.
referring people to those podcast
Yep, I have
episodes
all those up there.
also.
Mhm.
Perfect. So that means you have a speaker page.
Okay.
Do you have a speaker page?
Mhm.
Perfect. Oh, I
Yep.
love it when people say yes, they do. Okay, great.
Mhm.
So you're like steps ahead of a lot of people.
Okay. Well,
You
that's
may not
helpful.
have
I often feel behind, so that's good to know.
you may not have a speaker reel. You may not be on
Mhm.
TikTok. Either am I. I started and I was just like, no, this is not for me. I'm just on Instagram, LinkedIn. I do some Facebook, and then it's my podcast. My
Mhm.
podcast is my main stage.
Mhm. Okay.
So I use my podcast to get speaking events.
And you found that that's helpful because I've probably done, oh my goodness, 2 or 3 dozen podcasts at this point, but I'm not sure that I'm seeing any of, I'm like, I don't know if anyone listens to these podcasts. I don't know what their
You
their
could always
their
start your
stats
own.
are. People have said that to me. I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet, but we'll see.
Okay. Okay. Well, you just say you like to proceed with caution. That's okay. All right. So, how do you feel?
I feel much more confident now, and like I have a bit of a game plan, and I'm like, oh, let me see how I retool this all around change, and I feel like I have a bit more of a roadmap to how I would make the things that I talk about a little bit more palatable and approachable.
Great. Now, I ask everybody this question.
Mhm.
What's one or two gold nuggets that you are walking away with?
Certainly, looking into the Christian Speaker Bureau. Also, I think the reorganizing kind of a keynote around change and what that looks like. Those are the 2 ones, or the 2
Yeah.
big ones. There's a few others as well.
Great. When you are rewording your titles for your
Mhm.
keynotes and breakout sessions, make them really, I call them sexy, provocative titles. I want meeting planners to read them and say, oh my God, I want to be there for that.
Mhm. Okay.
Because your title, that's your first piece of advertisement. You get
To
people
get
to
people in
read
there.
the description about that talk.
Okay. I will. Yeah, it'll have to be something a little more punchy than
Yes.
just
Yes.
change. Okay. I'll
Yeah.
think about that.
Instead of just 6 ways to change your organization or
Right,
six
right. Yeah,
ways
I
to
wouldn't wanna go to
navigate
that talk.
change. Yeah. Yeah. Just, and even search other change speeches and
Mhm.
keynotes and just get an idea of like what else is out there? What do other speakers use? Just so that you get an idea and just note, like, I like this, I don't like that. And
Mhm.
that'll help you also come up with something that's just very punchy.
And do you recommend I know some people use, like, a subtitle as well. Do you recommend that or
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. And then have a nice little description.
Mhm.
Maybe even hey, go listen to this particular a link to like an Instagram live that you did where you're talking more about that particular topic.
Okay.
So
Alright.
that's almost like you're planning those out.
Alright.
Does that sound good?
Yes, thank you so much. This is so
Wonderful.
helpful. I feel like I can do this because I have wondered, I don't know, is this something that would be possible?
Well, I'm so glad that you raised your hand for a speaker breakthrough session because you got a lot out of it. And would you please let people know where they can find you, where they can follow you?
Sure. So my website hosts everything, so you can find me there. It's Christine, and then a V is in Victor, and then my last name, Davies.com. And I write weekly Substack posts that people can subscribe to either on my website or on journeyingalongside.com about spiritual direction and about hospital chaplaincy. And now I'm going to throw in all sorts of stories about change as well and what that looks like.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you would like to book a speaker breakthrough session because you've got this big question or you don't even know where to get started, whether you are new to speaking or you've got some speaking stages under your belt, you can book your own speaker breakthrough session. And during this free 25-minute session, we're going to talk about what's holding you back from using speaking as your best form of marketing. You can book that session at speakandstandout.com/SBS for speaker breakthrough session. Can't wait to see you on a future call.